Vietnamese and Spanish-speaking staff are reading the emails, so feel free to ask questions in those languages if it is more comfortable for you. The speaker will answer selected questions in English, after which the answer will be repeated in the language in which it was asked. In the event you need to leave during the webinar while it's in session, please email your question and someone from our staff will get back to you. Our email address is listed here and also on our resources slide. If you have any questions or if translation services are needed, someone from our staff will be happy to assist you. Our Q&A session will include staff from the city of San Jose. Our speaker, Bianca Blomquist, thank you very much and welcome. Bianca Blomquist manages small business majorities, outreach and education efforts for the Bay Area and the Northern California region. She develops relationships with business and organizations and small business owners to empower the voice of small business in California and works with the California Director on national and statewide policy efforts.
Hi there. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. I'm not on mute. I'm Bianca. Thank you so much for the introduction. I appreciate you having me here today. I work for Small Business Majority. We are a nonprofit organization. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now so that you all can follow along. There are question and answers. There's a question box at the bottom of your screen. Just type in questions there and I'll do my best to get to them as I go. Otherwise, I will answer them towards the end of the presentation. All right, Mirza, I'm clicking the 3 buttons here. I don't know, there, share screen. Bear with me, y'all. We're all in this together. All right, there we go. So thanks again, and I really appreciate the City of San Jose inviting me to speak here with you all today. I'm gonna jump right into it because I wanna be respectful of everybody's time. I imagine a lot of the folks that are on the webinar today are business owners that have some pretty pressing concerns. I also don't want to be redundant. So if I move quickly through the first part of this presentation, just know that we are all available to answer your questions afterwards. I'm briefly going to give an overview of the stimulus package that has passed so far in Congress, particularly phase 3, which includes the Paycheck Protection Program provisions in addition to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. But again, that was covered in last week's presentation, so I am not going to spend too much time on it. If you are curious how either the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is calculated or how the Paycheck Protection Program loans are calculated, you can reach out to any one of us that are participating on this webinar and ask after the presentation. An overview of my organization. So again, Small Business Majority is a 501c3 organization. We're a nonprofit. We were founded in 2005, primarily actually as a healthcare advocacy organization for small business owners. We focus on the top issues up to small businesses. We determine what those top issues are based upon our third-party independent polling and research. We poll small business owners nationwide and ask them, listen, as a small business owner in America, what issues are you facing? What can we work on? How can we help? Based on their sentiments, which are primarily access to capital, which is largely what a lot of small business owners are concerned about given the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak. Healthcare affordability. Frankly, Americans spend too much money on healthcare. They have a hard time affording it. That's a big problem. And wealth building issues. We have a network of 60,000 small business owners nationwide. Again, we're a national nonprofit. I manage operations in Northern California. We partner with business organizations and put on webinars just like this. It's the bread and butter of the work that we do. All of the business owners that we meet and we chat with, we have met directly in intimate conversations like this one. Okay, so phase one, phase two, and phase three of the stimulus package, primarily to help small business owners, have already happened. Phase three, as I said, contains the two provisions to help small business owners, including the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. The Paycheck Protection Program was the more substantial piece of that legislation. It contained about $350 billion to help small business owners in the form of forgivable loans. The smaller piece, the $10 billion, was called the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which is different from the Paycheck Protection Program in that it is smaller and it is offered directly through the Small Business Administration. If you are a small business owner and you're interested in applying for an EIDL loan, you need to apply directly online through the Small Business Administration. Briefly want to touch on phase four. Congress is beginning to consider phase four of the stimulus package. That could total $1 trillion. We don't know all the details about this yet, but we at Small Business Majority are urging Congress to put cash assistance, direct cash assistance, into the hands of small business owners, because if you're a small business owner that's applied for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program or the Paycheck Protection Program, you'll recognize that it is not moving very quickly. If you haven't heard or gotten an update on one of these programs, don't worry, you're not alone. Most small business owners are still waiting to see what they were approved for, how much of the loan advance they would get, etc. But again, we're not spending too much time on this today. A brief overview of the Paycheck Protection Program. A portion of that loan is forgiven. It's based on 8 weeks of payroll. It's calculated determining your payroll. You can apply with a local bank, a Small Business Administration 7A lender. Most traditional banks are 7A lenders. Again, we encourage small business owners to reach out to their personal and business accounts, as a lot of the business accounts that folks have, their banks are unfortunately not able to process the application. So again, we're recommending that small business owners just give them a call. But again, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, this presentation is not about the Paycheck Protection Program or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The folks at City Hall that are on this webinar today, including the Small Business Development Center and myself, are available to answer questions after the webinar about these programs. Again, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is somewhat smaller. It is available for small business owners who are interested in receiving a loan that is up to $2 million. You can apply online at covid19relief.sba.gov. Again, this program is offered directly through the SBA. It does take not very long to complete, which is good. The application's pretty easy, but we are expecting the Small Business Administration to get back to folks within 3 to 4 weeks. A side-by-side comparison I find can be helpful between the two programs. Again, Paycheck Protection Program is capped at $10 million, while the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is capped at $2 million. The EIDL loan has a up to $10,000 loan advance that is associated with it, and anything else is wrapped into 3.75% at 30 years, while the Paycheck Protection Program is wrapped into up to 1% at 2 years, so super low rates. I just kind of want to look at some of the questions. I know it's blinking at me. Yes, I will be able to give you a PDF of the presentation. We can all work with Mirza in making sure that all of these slides are available to you. Okay. So the Small Business Administration has engaged in debt relief efforts even before COVID-19. If you have another loan with the Small Business Administration and you're also interested in the EIDL loan, The SBA will automatically pay the principal, interest, and fees of current 7A, 504, and microloans for a period of 6 months. The SBA will also automatically pay the principal, interest, and fees of the new 7A loans that were issued prior to September 27th of this year. There's also something called the Employee Retention Credit. In my experience, this isn't as applicable to the smaller business owners that are participating in this webinar, but it's available in this slide for folks who do have questions about the Employee Retention Credit. Essentially, businesses that keep their employees on their payroll can get a 50% match, refundable tax credit paid to their workers. This is different than the other tax credit you might have been hearing about that was associated in the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, I believe. In either case, the acronym is FFCRA. That included an expanded FMLA, Family Medical and Leave Act, and an emergency FMLA in which the federal government will match you as an employer your wages at 100% upon paying your payroll taxes for continuing to pay folks paychecks while they are out sick for a COVID-related illness, and then a portion of that, up to 2/3, if they are taking care of a family member or a child that has COVID. And again, not 100%, but a tax credit associated for people who are taking care of kids that are home because their childcare has been discontinued because of COVID-19. Governor Newsom recently announced $50 million into additional funding into what is called the iBank. This announcement was made last week, I think on Thursday. The key takeaways here is that the iBank, the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, iBank, guarantees loans to small businesses who don't typically qualify for federal funds. One of the criticisms my organization did have about the phase 3 of the stimulus package is that by relying on traditional lenders, traditional 7A lenders, to get these Paycheck Protection Program funds into the hands of small business owners, you as a small business owner would likely need to have had a relationship with a lender. Unfortunately, this leaves out quite a few folks that have been largely ignored by the banking system in the past. We're talking about small business owners of color, business owners whose first language might not be English, or monolingual Spanish speakers, for example. In addition to women are largely left out of the traditional banking sector. A whole host of small business owners don't have relationships or credit relationships with their traditional lenders, which is why community development financial institutions exist in the first place. In either case, we were excited to see that Governor Newsom did announce $50 million into this fund. A lot more remains to be seen about where exactly these funds are going to go, to whom are they going to go, how are they going to be managed. But the point is that folks are listening to you, and if you are have not been able to get an appointment with your Wells Fargo, with your community bank, there are other options, particularly community development financial institutions. Quite a few operate in the South Bay, in the San Jose, Silicon Valley area, including Opportunity Fund, Pacific Community Ventures, CDC, Small Business Finance. There's a bunch if you'd like to find out more. I have a website called venturize.org. It's essentially a resource portal that I'll be showing you at the end of the webinar, where you can find some of these organizations that operate in that space that some of these other programs might not be as prevalent. We do have a Small Business Development Center advisor helping us out today and answering questions. Her name is Allie Lopez. She is the Small Business Development Center extraordinaire. She has been working nonstop to get answers to a lot of you small business owners in the South Bay. A little bit about a Small Business Development Center. Small business development centers are quasi-governmental organizations that are paid for through your taxpayer dollars. So they're not necessarily free, but it is free to make an appointment with a small business development center. If you're a small business owner, a sole proprietor, self-employed individual, entrepreneur, startup, you name it, go to venturize.org to find your local SBDC. There are a whole bunch of SBDCs in California. I want to say upwards of 40. They are in charge of helping small business owners in their respective regions. The Small Business Development Center for Silicon Valley is on Monterey Road in San Jose, and they are, like I said, working overtime to answer some of these more complicated questions that a lot of you will have about how the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL program impact your business, how you can take advantage of it. Perhaps you applied and you haven't heard back. Perhaps you have no idea how it's calculated and you missed last week's webinar on those issues. You can reach out to your Small Business Development Center or Mirza or myself or Sandra or any of the folks that are helping out with this webinar today can help point you in the right direction. So questions you can ask an advisor at the SBDC. You can ask questions about paid sick leave. You can ask questions about paid family leave, disability insurance, workers' compensation. I'm going to be chatting with you a little bit about the Employment Development Department. It is the state agency that is in charge of unemployment insurance, as well as the work share program in California. Full disclaimer, I don't work for the EDD. I work for Small Business Majority. If you haven't heard, the EDD is also working overtime and providing direct services to small business owners and to individuals who are unfortunately or for whatever are applying for some of the benefits for which they've paid into. Unemployment, for example, because of COVID-19, they're seeing unprecedented levels of folks apply. I'm also going to briefly discuss the expanded unemployment benefits that were recently announced by the federal government. These work in conjunction with California unemployment benefits. So in California, you receive $450 a week in unemployment insurance if you're applying for full unemployment insurance. The federal government has announced funds on top of that money per week, regardless of what the state is currently paying. So now we're going to jump into the work-share program. The work-share program is different than unemployment insurance, but essentially the work-share program is geared towards those employers that perhaps don't want to lay off no one wants to lay off their employees, but are not in a position where they need to financially lay off their workers, but they do need to cut back their hours. So the workshare program is a special part of the unemployment insurance program. It is somewhat complicated, and all the different aspects are different under Employment Development Department, under the EDD. But today, again, we're going to talk about workshare program. Again, workshare is different than UI in that the employer is the one that is filing for the program. With regular unemployment insurance or UI unemployment insurance, the claimant themselves, the individual, me, the employee of a small business, I apply for unemployment through the EDD. But with the workshare program, again, it's the employer who is wanting to participate in a workshare program. So if you just go to www.edd.ca.gov, what you see is the landing page for the workshare program. You can type work sharing into the little search box that's located there. You'll also find an FAQ that's readily available, questions that you need to download if you're an employer interested in the work-share program. You fill those questions out and you send them in to be processed. The work-share program becomes a plan essentially once it's approved. Just because you apply for a work-share program, unfortunately, doesn't mean that it is. You must apply and then it is approved. On a federal level, it's called the short-term compensation plan, but in California, we were actually the first state to implement a work-share program of our own through the EDD in 1978. But the plan is either approved or denied, and once that happens, the employer has to file an unemployment claim that matches with the work-share program. There's another plan that involves a certification in which the employer is paid because there's a reduction in wages and hours with the work-share program. The employer has to participate since the employer is the one that's going to essentially be reporting on any reduction in wages or hours associated with work sharing. It has yet to become streamlined. Unfortunately, it's a very paper-driven process and it's still pretty complex. So if any of this is confusing, again, I apologize. You'll want to head to edd.ca.gov. There you can find more straightforward FAQs, but again, this is more of a broad level overview of the program. Also, if you head to smallbusinessmajority.org, our COVID-19 resource portal, you will see a on-demand webinar that was given on March 20th with essentially the manager of all the work-share programs in California, an expert, not like me, not an expert, in which he really goes pretty deeply into the ins and outs of the work-share program. So you can find that there at smallbusinessmajority.org. So essentially, the work-share program provides temporary partial wage replacement to eligible underemployed workers. It can be used when employers reduce hours and wages of the workforce or an entire work unit. The main takeaways from the work-share program is that it's really intended to be an alternative to layoffs. As you know, the state government and the federal government are doing everything they can to keep the American workers employed. There are benefits to the employee in that they don't lose their job, obviously, and they receive some sort of income from the employer while also receiving a supplemental benefit from the Employment Development Department, the EDD. So from the employer, they get to retain their staff, which is really important. We all know, if you are a small business owner, how expensive it can be to retrain your staff. Rehire folks is also expensive. So if you can keep your employees, full-time and reduce their hours, then you can participate in the work-share program without having to retrain and recruit new workers. You can be a private institution, you can be a nonprofit. Nonprofits are also eligible to participate in the work-share program. You can be a public entity. All types of employers can apply for the work-share program. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will be eligible to receive benefits. But whether or not you're eligible is really hard to say on its face. I'd like to click on the questions here, but I imagine they're going to be pretty, do I apply? Am I eligible? One of the pieces of advice we can give you is it doesn't hurt to just apply and see what they say. But there are quite a few restrictions that come into place in regards to why an employer wants to participate in a work-share program that may or may not make them eligible. So the plans are approved for 1 year, and after that, if an employer wants to stay on it, they would have to ask for an extension. The reason for this is because work-share programs are not meant to be long-term. They are not meant to replace your business model. If you are looking into a work-share program, the Small Business Development Center advisors can help you do that. If you are looking into a work-share program, you are definitely going to want to revisit your business plan. But again, the takeaway here is that the work-share program is meant to be temporary only. Okay. Another point to make about the work-share program is that the employee's health and retirement benefits in effect prior to the work-sharing application made on behalf of the employer will not be eliminated. So you must maintain those benefits or diminished unless the benefits are changed for the entire workforce. You must have at least 2 employees to participate in a work share program. It's important that you understand that you can have a workforce, but not everyone has to be under the work share program. So you can have a work share program among a specific department as an employer. It doesn't need to be across the board, your entire workforce. Some staff can remain on full time, and the other portion of your staff can participate in a work share program. The employee must want to participate in the work share program. It is entirely voluntary. If the employee would prefer not to have their hours reduced under a work share program and go ahead and apply for unemployment insurance in its full, they are allowed to do that. On the employer side, you can always establish a plan again, but not everybody has to be on that plan. Again, the purpose of the work-share program is about maintaining the workforce at a super important time for the economy. The EDD is doing pretty much everything they can to inject money into the hands of the people that need it the most. Typically, EDD is for employees, but again, the work-share program is different because you, as the employer, will be working with EDD to make sure that all your ducks are in a row. Normal weekly hours of work and wages are reduced at least 10%, but no more than 60%. So bear with me as I dive into this just a little bit. Again, it's an alternative to layoffs. This program allows the payment of benefits to employees whose hours and wages have been reduced but not eliminated, and they have to have been reduced more than just a smidge. To be eligible, a small reduction in wages is conceptually sustainable as an employer. So although your employer is reducing your wages by more than 60%, in that point, there's an incentive for the employee to just go ahead and apply for unemployment insurance. So again, that's why the work-share program operates in that between 10 and 60% range, because it is meant for those employers that are operating in that gray area where the workers might not be better off applying to unemployment insurance through the EDD. The 10 to 60% calculation is somewhat complicated. I can't really get into it too much because, again, I don't work for the EDD. But because the employer is such an integral part of the process, they are the ones that will be making these calculations each week. So just like if you have ever applied for unemployment insurance in the past, you do need to report to the EDD as the employer each week. Just give me 1 second. So yeah, you would submit the wages, you would let them know how much your wages have been reduced, and then you would do the reduction using this guideline that I have set up here for you. So again, this is only meant to be a high-level example of the reduction. When it comes to regular UI, unemployment insurance, the maximum that folks can receive in California is $450 a week. If an employee's hours are reduced by 20%, the work-share program becomes an option for their employer. The employer would prorate the 20%, and an employee would then get $90. An employee cannot receive both unemployment insurance and supplemental wages through the work-share program at the same time. Folks can vacillate between the two as the economy changes and shifts. An employer, one can imagine, might think that the work-share program is a good idea, and then a few months later recommend that his or her workforce participate in unemployment insurance fully. It depends, but the point here is that if I'm an employee, I cannot participate in unemployment insurance and in the work-share program at the same time. It's one or the other. I mentioned that it's possible for an employee to move between the two. Again, whether or not they are approved, none of this means that you'll necessarily be approved. Whether or not they're approved is a different story. But again, what I'm trying to illustrate here is that it's one or the other. So the employee must be regularly employed by the employer whose work sharing plan application has been approved. Again, the approval process is super important. Just because you apply doesn't mean you're approved. The employee must be a part of the employer's permanent regular workforce. This means that if you are a seasonal employee or a part-time employee, temporary employee, you are not eligible to be counted in the work share program. The employee must have completed a normal work week with no hour or wage reductions prior to participating in work sharing. So this is important. If you're an employer who is considering the work sharing program, you should chat with the business advisor right away to make sure that any reductions in staff or wages doesn't compromise your ability to participate in the program. Okay, this is the most important slide that I have to give you on the Workshare program. These are all the places that you are going to need to go if you are interested in participating in a Workshare program. The EDD's webpage, edd.ca.gov, work sharing employer requirements and criteria. There are also I did remember I said that this is a very paper-driven process. Unfortunately, all of the papers that you will need to download and fill out are available at these different web pages. Unemployment insurance. So on March 6th, the president signed the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act, because it totally rolls off the tongue, also known as Phase 1, into law. Essentially what that bill did was that provided $8.3 billion in emergency funding for federal agencies to respond to the coronavirus outbreak. It also enabled the SBA to make an estimated $7 billion in low-cost loans to affected small businesses. This also opened up the more relaxed requirements for the first part of the economic injury disaster loan. If you are a small business owner and you applied to the EIDL, or let me rephrase, if you're a small business owner who's been impacted by COVID-19 for quite some time, you may have applied to the economic injury disaster loan prior to the signing of the CARES Act on March 27th, which was Phase 3. So essentially, the SBA has been working to get assistance into small business owners' hands for quite some time. With the FFCRA, which was another addition to the stimulus package that was Phase 2, that created the Emergency Family Medical Leave Expansion Act that I mentioned before, the Expanded and Emergency FMLA. Essentially what that did was it allowed small business owners who are paying wages to their employees that are out sick due to COVID-19, a 100% match for their taxes when it comes to their payroll for keeping those employees on their roster. Governor Newsom joined Bitwise Industries in announcing what's called Onward CA, as in onwardcalifornia.org. It's essentially a platform that connects COVID-19 displaced workers with almost 100,000 job opportunities in critical industries. We know that some of the industries in California have been hit harder than others, especially considered not every business is deemed essential. smallbusinessmajority.org. This is our own COVID-19 resource portal. Seems like everybody has one, and they do. They're very important, and they all have pretty useful information. I know for the small business community right now, it's not so much that you don't have the information that you need, but perhaps you have too much. A lot is coming at you. I will say that our resource page is somewhat different and that the majority of it contains educational materials, essentially recordings of me talking at a screen just like this, and other folks, experts, folks from the city of San Jose, Ali Lopez from the Silicon Valley SBDC, Helen Trollman from SCORE Silicon Valley, folks all over California who are paid to give you these resources are featured on our on-demand webinars on that page. I like to joke that venturize.org, if it is used as much as it should be used, will one day put me out of a job. Venturize.org is essentially our resource hub. Everything that I know and everything that I share with you, the small business community, is located on venturize.org. It also has a program on there I mentioned for those folks who the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program are not quite a fit for whatever reason. There is a safe place for you as a small business owner to access responsible capital. Everybody on venturize.org has been vetted by either myself, my team, my boss, to make sure that they have your best interests at heart. We know that for a couple different reasons. First, they have participated in one form or another in signing of the Truth in Lending legislation signed by Governor Brown before he left office. California became the very first state to implement its own Truth in Lending legislation for small business owners, guaranteeing clarity, transparency, and all the terms and conditions associated with loans made to you as a small business owner. Or they're part of the Responsible Business Lending Coalition. Opportunity Fund is a part of the Responsible Business Lending Coalition. It's a unique consortium of lenders, advocacy groups, fintech companies. There are online lenders that do care about small business owners and have disclosed their fees clearly and transparently for you. Again, you can find access to all of these vetted sources of capital on venturize.org. There is a part of Venturize called Match Finder. There's just a really simple set of questions that you can type in and be paired with a lender that has that might be a good fit for your small business. Again, we are dedicated to ensuring that lawmakers and the media hear from real small business owners. This is critically important as we move into phase 4 of the stimulus package. I am working tirelessly with small business owners to make sure they are connected to their policymakers. If you are having a hard time waiting for the Paycheck Protection Program loans to be approved, if you are still waiting for your EIDL loan advance, all of these issues are issues that your congressperson needs to know about, your state senator, your assembly person, etc. This is how you can find them. You can also reach out to me. But again, it's not too late. We are still working on phase 4 of the stimulus package. That's how you can get connected. And this is how you can stay in touch with us. I have usually been putting on my personal cell phone number, but unfortunately I have so many messages on my phone that I'm still working on getting through those. So if you do want to reach out to me and you have a question for me, you can email me at B as in Bianca, Bloomquist BLOM as in Mary, QUIST at smallbusinessmajority.org. You can also write to me a message through our website. You can reach out to Mirza or Sandra or Ali Lopez, who have all graciously helped me put together the information that we're sharing today on this webinar. So I think I literally just talked for 43 minutes straight. Mirza, I'm assuming folks have questions. Not sure if you wanted to throw some at me. I know Ali from the Silicon Valley SBDC is also prepared to answer questions, and she is the resident expert of all things business advice. So I'm gonna go ahead and go on mute for a minute.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Bianca. We're going to begin this session now with our questions and answers. And if you haven't done so, we ask that you use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen to submit your question or inquiry. And we're going to ask Ali Lopez with the Silicon Valley SBDC. She will be addressing any questions. I am going to call out the questions in order as we received them. And Ali will be providing an answer to them. Thank you for your patience. How is the EIDL or idle amount calculated?
I actually don't know if, I know that Ali was going to be trying to answer questions in the chat box. I'll wait for Ali to jump on. I don't know that she is, that she's going to be able to speak. But the idle loan itself is calculated in kind of an interesting way. So it's important to remember there's a difference between the economic injury disaster loan and the loan advance that is associated with the loan. The economic injury disaster loan is still a little bit unclear how the loan itself is calculated, but I can tell you that the max that you can receive for an economic injury disaster loan is $2 million. And the maximum amount that you can receive from the loan advance portion of the economic injury disaster loan is $10,000. The loan advance is calculated essentially by how many employees you have. So you are eligible for up to $1,000 per employee, up to 10 employees. So essentially up to $10,000 in the loan advance.
Great, thank you. Question number 2. If I already laid off my employees with COVID-19, shelter in place first started and then applied for PPP, do I rehire the employees to full-time to qualify for the loan forgiveness?
That's a great question. Yeah, so a couple things. You have, as the employer who is interested in getting as much of the Paycheck Protection Program forgiven as possible, you have until June 30th to hire as many of your employees back as possible. Or let me rephrase that, to restore your workforce to as close to 100% as possible. The reason I say that is because you don't need to hire your exact employees back for whatever reason. Your employees are unable to come back to work. You won't be penalized for that. But the goal is to restore your workforce to as close to as full as possible. Again, you have until June 30th to do that. If you're unable to do that, remember that any part of your Paycheck Protection Program loan that is given to you, taken by you, and not forgiven is wrapped into the loan rate of max 1% at 2 years.
Great, thank you. Question number 3. Can I apply for PPP with multiple banks?
We are encouraging folks call their banks and see if they are in the process of actually processing and filing the Paycheck Protection Program loans. I have heard different things. I'm not totally sure. Allie might have a good answer to that. I have heard that if you
This is Allie, sorry. I'm
ahead.
answering questions on multiple platforms. So SBA does not encourage you to go to more than one lender.
Great, thank you. I'm a self-employed landscape maintenance and the only employee. How does this apply?
Can you get a little more specific? How does what apply? The work share program?
Could we ask, maybe we will circle back. We do not have additional information on this question, but I will ask my peers here with the city to check the Q&A or the chat to verify or clarify the question. Thank you.
Really quick, because thank you for, I'm not sure if that's what they're talking about, but it's good to remind folks that in order to participate in the workshare program, you do need at least 2 employees.
Great, thank you. Next question. If I own a S-Corp, a small business corporation, and pay myself by W-2, and also worked as independent contractor and received the 1099 from another company, which PP should I apply?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Should I apply as an independent contractor with 1099 or as an S-Corp with a W-2?
Allie, you want to take that one?
So you could do one or the other. You can't do both. If you go as a corporation with W-2, you might have more options and you can apply now. Whereas if you go in as an independent contractor, you can't apply till tomorrow.
Oh, right.
I would go in now.
Thank you for that, Allie. It's good to remind folks, thank you so much, that independent contractors and self-employed folks cannot apply for the Paycheck Protection Program until tomorrow, the 10th.
Great, thank you.
If it's for the idle, they can apply now, and it doesn't matter what your structure is.
Wonderful, thank you. I have a question about unemployment. The website said the person qualified for $286 per week. So they are going to receive the difference amount to complete the $600 per week in a different way. How does that work?
I'm not totally sure I understand the question.
If we can ask the individual that submitted this question to please verify via the Q&A or via chat, we would appreciate it, and we can circle back. Thank you. Next question. I have an employee who is over 60 years old and says he will get a doctor, not saying that he needs to self-isolate as a precautionary. Does this scenario qualify for sick time or sick leave?
Yeah, Allie, do you want to jump in? Otherwise, I'm happy to.
Hi, this is Chris.
I was going to say Chris answered it, and it's not my area of expertise, so Chris could probably answer it.
Hi everyone. So there's not enough information in the question. However, because this is kind of new for everybody, the Department of Labor does have put up some guidelines, requirements on their website. So actually you can just type in sick leave DOL into Google and it will bring it up for you. But really what the Families First Coronavirus Response Act does is that, yes, anything that's related to COVID-19, that includes self-isolation, only as precautionary, as well as, kids being out of school and whatnot, would qualify. But with without more information, I do suggest everybody go take a look at the Department of Labor's FAQs. They're frequently asked questions. They have about 79 answered questions right now. If you cannot find the information that you are requesting, please feel free to reach out to my office through our email address that we've set up for this. It's called mywage@sanjoseca.gov for any questions, and we can help you through that process.
Thank you, Chris. Next question. I did not lay off my employees, but reduced the salary of the full-time employee, and most of them are part-time, which I have not scheduled to work due to being closed. So do I qualify?
For the work share program?
If the individual that provided this question, if you can specify, we would appreciate.
Yeah, it's really helpful because there are so many different programs that we've talked about today, and so if it's a question about the work share program, maybe specify that, or Paycheck Protection Program, or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program might be helpful.
Thank you. The next question, can we apply for unemployment, and can we provide assistance with the application?
So yes, applying for unemployment is at edd.ca.gov. There are a lot of resources there that can help. I am not a caseworker, but I am somewhat familiar with the website. The Small Business Development Center is somewhat familiar, I think, with some of these processes. There's another organization called Legal Aid at Work that helps workers apply for unemployment, paid family leave claims, etc.
Thank you. Next question. There was talk about a 2-month rent forgiveness program. Do you have information on this?
So there is a couple different things. So there is not rent forgiveness, but rent is considered a qualifying expense under the Paycheck Protection Program. So it's your paycheck, it's rent, it is utilities. That is an eligible expense for forgiveness under the Paycheck Protection Program. If you are facing issues paying your rent, you can always ask your landlord for a deferment. Governor Newsom has urged folks to be lenient and flexible when it comes to folks' late fees, rent, etc. It's also possible that you may not be evicted from your home. And certain cities have passed moratoriums on residential evictions and business evictions as well. Although, evictions is kind of like one of the more harsh things to happen. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. But it is recommended that you reach out to your landlords and ask for a deferment if possible. But rent is not waived under these programs. It's simply eligible for forgiveness in the loan.
Thank you. The next question. Does managing personal real estate rentals qualify as self-employment or as an independent contractor for the loans?
Allie? Well, I'm happy to try that one out. I mean, I don't know that it would be an independent contractor, but I think that would be how do I say this? I think that this person who operates that business would be able to apply for a Paycheck Protection Program or for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Not for the work sharing though, if it's just the one individual.
Thank you. Next question, can an employer apply for PPP after reducing the hours from full-time employees? Reduced hours from 40 hours to 20 hours due to COVID-19.
To go ahead, go on the WorkShare website. I know that is a significant amount reduction to apply. But if they have already cut those hours and been operating with those cut hours, that might make you ineligible, but I'm not sure. I would encourage this individual to go on edd.ca.gov, type in WorkShare program, and go ahead and apply.
Thank you. Next question, does participation in the WorkShare program count against business similar to unemployment claims?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
Okay. Next question, can the WorkShare program be applied to employers who are participating in a WIOA funded on-the-job training program where a portion of the wages are already subsidized?
Ooh, that's a good question too. My gut says no, because a couple slides in, I did, it did outline that it was important that these workers were considered regular full-time workers. That might be something that Allie could help out with, but it's definitely something that could be answered on the FAQ page at edd.ca.gov. That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Can a part-time employee apply for unemployment after her employer shut down temporarily due to COVID-19?
Yes.
Thank you. Next question. Hi there, I own a small business, a beauty salon, and it's LLC. I don't have any employees as of now. My business is shut since shelter in place. I am a single mom and my business is my only living. Which loan should I apply for that is forgiven, and can you please give me all the resources? Thanks, we'll really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, thank you for taking the time to participate. You're doing all the right things by, educating yourself and finding the best resources for your business. There are so many right now. I'm not, again, a business advisor. I can't give you advice either way, but just given how slowly things are moving in both regards to the economic injury disaster loan and the Paycheck Protection Program, I would go ahead and apply to both. I would think that the EIDL might be a little more applicable, since it doesn't sound like this individual has employees. But there's nothing that prevents you from applying to both. And to go ahead and check out smallbusinessmajority.org on that resource portal I mentioned earlier. We have quite a few other, there was I think it was on the 19th of March. We had Eric from Economic Development Department, the actual expert, on to talk about some additional resources for employees, in addition to SNAP benefits, other relief funds that exist for certain industries that were harder hit. So a lot of this information is available at smallbusinessmajority.org on our resource portal.
Thank you. Next question. In PPP, they are asking us to include EIDL amounts. I do not know how and what to be included in PPP, the EIDL amount. Could you please clarify what they are and how are they related?
Yeah, great question. So the reason for that, the federal government here wants to prevent what's called double dipping. It's essentially you cannot use both the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Individual Disaster Loan Program for the same thing. So if you were to use the Paycheck Protection Program funds for payroll, and then you were to get approved for a certain amount for the economic injury disaster loan, you wouldn't be able to use the same those funds for the same thing. And so the idea is that if you were to get your EIDL loan and then apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, already have received your EIDL loan, they would like you to subtract that from that loan, because your EIDL loan will eventually be refinanced into the Paycheck Protection Program. But it sounds like you either haven't applied for the economic injury disaster loan, or you don't know how much you got and were approved for. So if that's the case, then I would just go ahead and leave that blank. But that's a good question for the Small Business Development Center too.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next question. I hired a person 3-to-1 for a job for a specific job at my company. Is that paycheck eligible for PPP since there is no payroll history?
I would imagine that you would have to have some way of proving what the pay history was. I'm not sure. It doesn't sound promising, but that is, again, a question that you could find online or by making an appointment with your SBDC. But I imagine that also doesn't sound like the craziest thing. I'm sure other individuals are in that same position. So I would go ahead and Google it, essentially.
Wonderful, thank you. Once you have completed the PPP application and it is approved, do you have an idea on the time frame of getting the funds?
Yeah, so let's see. Paycheck Protection Programs applications were supposed to begin to be filed on April 3rd. It's April 9th, minus a day because it was Sunday. I don't know. So we're expecting a few weeks, basically. I am only now beginning to hear of folks being approved for their EIDL loan, which isn't what this question was in pertains to, and it's through a different organization. But given all of the obstacles that we've been running into with Wells Fargo, with the community banks, with, well, let me be more clear, with the national banks like Wells Fargo in processing these applications, and the availability of community banks as being essentially the only ones that are processing a lot of these applications, it's going to take some time.
Thank you. Next question. If my employees are on a temporary layoff and unemployment insurance, can you maintain their health insurance during this time?
Great.
There's a second part to the question. Do they remain eligible for benefits during this time?
Yes. So the Paycheck Protection Program, one of the eligible expenses that you as the employer can expense and then include for forgiveness come June 30th is medical benefits. So if you have furloughed your employees and you continue to pay their health insurance, that is a forgivable expense under the Paycheck Protection Program.
Thank you. Next question. Will anyone call us from SCA before the EIDL advance and your EIDL loan amount will be given? I ask because I realize I inputted inaccurate amounts in the application. This was a pre-streamed application version.
Okay, so it sounds like it was one of the versions that was before March 30th. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't really imagine that there's going to be a lot of folks going around right now. I really don't know. But I can say that if you did apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program before March 30th, to go ahead and reapply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The reason I say that is because the up to $10,000 loan advance that's associated in the CARES Act with the EIDL loan, that was signed into law on Friday, March 27th. So a lot of folks had already applied for an a disaster loan through the SBA before that 10K advance was signed into law. And so in order to be eligible for the up to 10K loan advance, to go ahead and reapply again for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan.
Thank you. Next question. To clarify for PPP, are you allowed to use the funds for expenses other than payroll, knowing that the funds will be a loan and not forgiven?
Yes, there are additional expenses that are forgiven outside of rent, utilities, medical benefits, dental, something like materials or equipment. That is not a forgivable expense, and anything that is not forgivable is wrapped into that up to 1% at 2-year rate.
Thank you. The next question, which resources should I look into as the owner-operator with no employees?
Both the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL loan, work share program would not be applicable to this individual.
Thank you. Next question. Can a nonprofit organization apply for EIDL?
Yes, they can. The rate for Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program for a for-profit is 3.75% at 30 years. The rate for a nonprofit is 2.75% at 30 years. So yes, they can go ahead and apply for an Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the rate is a little bit different.
Thank you. Next question. How long does it take EIDL to fund? Website says 3 to 5 days. I applied since first day it started, but heard nothing from SBA. How is this loan processed now? I still can have hope for it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, it's taking a lot longer than they had thought. That whole loan advance up to $10,000 loan advance in 3 days is not happening. I have not spoken to one small business owner that has been approved for an EIDL loan that has also received the loan advance. So forget the 3 days. It's taking a few weeks. Again, I'm hearing small business owners that are finally getting approved for their EIDL loans, so it is happening. A few weeks, I think, is about right. But again, to note, when they said that they applied when it first came about, if it was before March 30th, you need to go ahead and reapply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan in order to be eligible for that up to $10,000 loan advance. Additionally, I know that for a little while there before the CARES Act, and then even maybe a day or two afterwards, they were accepting paper copies or paper applications only. It's now only online. So if you applied before March 30th, go ahead and reapply online directly to the SBA website.
Thank you. Next question. Can independent contractors from last year be included in the average payroll calculation, while the loan be applied to pay employees in the 8 weeks after approval?
No. Independent contractors must apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program on their own.
Thank you. Next question. Can I wait to spend the PPP loan for the payrolls after the shelter in place is over?
Because we don't know when the shelter in place will be over, then I guess the answer to that could be yes. But for now, the guidance says that June 30th is the deadline. So just keeping that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Next question. For the SBA loan that has the $10,000 advance, is this a grant meaning you don't have to pay back or in advance until you receive the rest of the funds?
That's a great question. So the way that we are understanding it, again, we don't know anyone who's gotten this loan advance yet, but the way that we understand the guidance is that this is an advance on the loan that does not need to be paid back, no strings attached.
Thank you. Next question. I'm a small coffee shop owner with 3 part-time employees. What options would be best for us?
Well, first of all, thank you for all that you do. I'm drinking a cup of coffee right now. I very much miss my coffee shop so much, and I apologize that you're going through this. It's a really tough time. So if you have 3 employees, the work share program, depending on where your business is at, might be an option for you. It depends on how significantly their wages and hours have been reduced. But a coffee shop owner with 3 employees would be eligible to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program as well as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question. Will professional liability insurance be forgiven in the PPP loan?
I think so. I'm not sure. You can find that answer though. That's an easier one that you should be able to find. Just go ahead and Google Paycheck Protection Program Forgiveness Insurance. I think so, but you can double check and you can find that answer pretty easily.
Thank you. And our last question. We own a small S-corporation. We are paid as part of our payroll, each of us receiving paychecks and a W-2. We are anticipating participating in the work share program for our employees whose hours have been reduced to 20%. We have also reduced our own income to 20%. Are we the officers of the S-corporation able to participate in the work share program?
I mean, I think that they could, but they don't need to be, because if you remember, certain parts of the workforce can participate in a work share program while other parts do not have to. So I think it would depend on your business model, your business plan, what would be best for your business. But I know that that it doesn't need to be the same situation, the same plan. Not everyone has to work under the same work share program, but one part can.
Okay, we have 2 additional questions. First one is, I understood that the PPP forgivable amount would focus on ensuring number of headcount retained as opposed to the dollar amount of payroll paid out during the covered period. I ask because I could theoretically use all the PPP amount on payroll, but for about 4 of my 5 headcount going forward.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. Again, that would be a question for your Small Business Development Center. But again, it is more about retaining your workforce and getting your staffing levels back to a certain amount. Since we're not totally sure what the economy is going to be like, I think it's more focused on the head count and that individual's understanding is correct.
And our last question, in the idle, what does this question mean? Is it your expenses? Combined annual operating expenses for the 12 months prior to the date of the disaster, January 31st, 2020, for all secular social services provided by the faith-based entity.
Ugh, I'm not sure about that one. Sorry to leave it on that note. I really don't know. Maybe because it was a longer question, that if they could send it to Allie or myself in an email, that might be helpful.
Thank you. And we have 2 additional questions that just came through. The first one is, how do we include rent and utilities expenses in PPP as there is no option to add?
I think that's not what that is something that is eligible for forgiveness after you are approved for the loan. So the loan amount is determined by taking your payroll and multiplying that by 2.5. Your average payroll, multiplying that by 2.5 gives you an estimated amount that they'll give to you. The rent and the additional expenses is what you would then spend, and it would be eligible for forgiveness come June 30th. So there's one piece, and that's how much you are approved for is calculated. And then there's the second piece, and that is the amount for which you ask to be forgiven.
Additional question. I own a beauty salon, so no secular social services expenses in my shop, right?
Yeah, that's the second one that says secular service expenses. I'm lost on that one. I'm not totally sure. But when it comes to the line-by-line questions with the EIDL, that is exactly something that the Small Business Development Center is there to help you with.
Wonderful, thank you. A couple more questions. Will you be providing the Q&As and the emails that were left in the chat boxes? Actually, we will relay that question. And please, anyone on this call, please give us, drop us an email, and the information will be provided very shortly. Thank you. Wonderful. So if there are any additional questions, that actually concludes the Q&A session.
Hi, Sandra.
Yes.
Sorry, this is Mirza. How's everybody doing? Thank you so much for joining us. I believe we had 2 individuals that have their hands raised. I'm gonna go ahead and ask if Nahan can go ahead. I'm gonna open up your Zoom and allow it to talk. If you can go ahead and please just ask a question. Nahan, are you there? All right, I'm sorry, but I think we have one other person. I'm gonna go ahead and just check to see if they are open to asking any questions. Please go ahead and feel free. I've just unmuted. All right, so if anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to email us. Sandra's gonna go ahead and provide a little bit of information upon some follow-up. You guys can go ahead, anything that's related to the speaker series, please feel free to email me. My name is Mirza Hanzar, and my email is posted right on this page. We'll also be able to provide anybody who attended the webinar recordings of the webinar, along with the amazing PowerPoint that Bianca had, as well as our PowerPoint. So this way you have all the contact information for the right folks in the city. If you have a business that might be downsizing or laying off in the near future, we would really recommend you can go ahead and reach out to our Workers Adjustment and Retraining Notification Warrant Business Service team at Work for Future at sanjose.gov, as well as any additional follow-up questions. I do apologize we weren't able to answer during this webinar. Please go ahead and email us at covid19sjbusiness@sanjoseca.gov. And again, I just want to say how grateful we are to have such a great panel of folks who are able to answer questions. We're really happy that Bianca was able to provide such a great overview of some of the services and resources that are out there. So I just want to go ahead and let everybody know if your questions were not answered, please keep in mind we will follow up, and also you can email us at COVID-19 sjbusiness@sanjoseca.gov.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, so much. Hope everybody has a great day.
You too. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.